I am gaming. I am gaming. I am gaming podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Ivica. Thank you so much for joining me on the latest episode of I'm Gaming Podcast. This is a podcast about the gaming industry, entrepreneurship, gaming nostalgia, and many more cool things I find to be in the same realm of business and creative ventures. Like always, first and foremost, a huge thanks goes to my Patreon supporters. Without you, this podcast would not be possible, and with you, it is. So a big thanks to everyone who is supporting me right now on this awesome platform. If you want to join them, please check out my Patreon page in the description below. It will take you to my page. And here you can find out more of how you can support me and also why you should consider supporting me. But enough about my Patreon page. It's time for this week's topic, which is the gaming development space or video game development space. More precisely, indie or independent strategies, which I see as mainly puzzles that are covertly trying to sell you the fact that they are puzzles through a strategy front. Now, what do I mean by this? Creating strategy games, full on true strategy games that have AI elements and stuff like that. For example, consider, let's say, StarCraft 1 that came out more than 2 decades ago, is really hard even today for an indie team. If you have a game dev team of, let's say, a single digit number, so it's not more than 10 persons, it's going to be a really difficult and demanding venture because there are so many elements that you need to cram into that game. Many of them are in the actual programming elements of the game itself and how the AI, the computer, your opponent, actually behaves in terms of its strategy, its tactics, and many additional things. So recreating StarCraft even 25 years later would be an incredibly hellish and difficult job. So there is an alternative. If you're a small game dev team, you can actually create puzzle games that are masquerading themselves as strategies. And that is a really effective way. There are a bunch of amazing games, for example, Bad North is a perfect example, that do the same thing and basically provide a simple puzzle-like environment where you have to respond to a sequence of events with another sequence of events so that you have a beneficial ending or a beneficial result. That is really boiling it down to the most basic components, but it actually works that way. Bad North is a game where you defend your island from invading Northmen, and you do that by simply having access to different kind of units, which is a really simple setup for each of those units, and then placing them on different tiles. When the invasion begins, you respond to that sequence with your sequence, and you don't even have to have a true AI opponent that builds bases, decides how to use economy and stuff like that. Instead, AI simply uses predefined routes that you then, through game and its progression as a player, learn and figure out. And while you do that, you learn and figure out how you can respond to that sequence with a sequence of your own. That's basically a puzzle game, but with a nice exterior front where you showcase units, have territories that you defend. Even though it's a single mission and you always defend the same generic island, you get that sense of things being a strategy. Also, you have your metagame where you evolve and improve your units, but again, that's just changing the elements of the puzzle slightly, and this is also very computable, and you can have foresight into the ways players will use that and manipulate it. You also add an element of random luck, and you have a full, apparently, strategy game. At the same time, under the hood, it's basically nothing more than a puzzle game. Another good example of the same approach, same principle, is Into the Breach from the creators of FTL. Another example of a completely basic puzzle game, which again masks itself as a Japanese anime manga themed mecha versus aliens or titans or kanji. Again, a puzzle game, but with a presentation of a strategy game. So if you're an indie team and you love strategies, I first love strategies, but I know how hard they are to be created, even on a basic level, consider actually creating a puzzle game. Whatever that puzzle game might be, then consider reskinning it or recreating it or de-evolving it, let's call it that way, into a strategy-like release. There is a big market for those games. They are really satisfying to play. Bad North is a fantastic game. I enjoyed it from the start to the finish, but it is much easier to be created and much easier to function properly without all of these elements that, for example, StarCraft 1 had 25 years ago. You can avoid that. Turn a strategy from a basic puzzle game into an indie strategy in a quick, logical succession. It's also hard to develop. You need time, you need effort, everything else, but you can do it, as these examples clearly show. So there is a way to look at puzzle games as embers of a fire that will become a strategy game or strategy look-like game, and one that you can, as an indie team, actually create instead of trying to build something that will fall apart like a bad version of StarCraft, for example. So with that approach, you can develop a principle that turns your puzzle game into an indie strategy, hopefully an award-winning, blockbuster, record-breaking, profit-making strategy game. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, please leave them in the description below. If not, please check out all of my Patreon supporters and their amazing ventures also in the description below. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to have you as a subscriber. I would love to have or see you become my Patreon supporter, but I know that costs money. Money is getting tighter and tighter, so you can easily avoid doing it, and all other means of supporting me. Instead, just subscribe and leave a like. That would be more than enough. That's all from me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you precisely 7 days from now, and until then, bye bye.